Welcome, everyone. Whether you're a finance leader, a strategy consultant, or a CMA candidate, I am absolutely thrilled to have you here. Today, we're doing something really exciting. We're going to elevate our perspective, stepping away from the daily grind of operational execution and diving deep into structural strategy. We'll be breaking down Michael Porter's seminal Five Forces framework. Now look, our goal here isn't just rote memorization. No way. It's to train you to think like a top-tier strategist, to diagnose structural profitability, and to figure out exactly where to deploy capital. Let's dive right in.
So I want you to consider this really fascinating paradox. Why are some industries consistently more profitable than others? Just imagine you have two investment options on the table, okay? You could open a new airline, or you could launch an enterprise software company. Both have brilliant managers, and both have incredibly robust financing. But do they have the exact same chance of generating high margins? Well, the answer is a resounding no. You see, exceptional execution is never enough if the fundamental structure of your industry is inherently flawed.
Here's a quick look at our roadmap for today. We're going to kick things off with the profitability paradox, then introduce the Five Forces diagnostic. After that, we'll analyze the power dynamics at play, expose some really common strategic blind spots, and finally, bring it all together with a consultant's synthesis.
All right, let's jump straight into Section 1, the profitability paradox.
Picture this. Imagine an airline announces that passenger numbers are up by 15% and top-line revenue is up 10%. Sounds great, right? But then profit margins have mysteriously plummeted to just 5%. Now, if you aren't thinking structurally, you might just assume, oh, demand must be weak. But wait, demand is actually rising. Now, contrast that with the pharmaceutical industry. They enjoy structurally high margins, solid patents, and very few substitutes. So the airline's issue isn't about demand at all. It's the fact that intense rivalry, incredibly powerful buyers, and highly volatile supplier costs are literally destroying their margins from the inside out.
And that brings us to a really foundational executive rule. Industry attractiveness does not equal managerial competence. For those of you gearing up for the CSCA exam, I want you to mentally underline this right now. It's that important. The absolute most brilliant managers in the world simply cannot out-execute a fundamentally flawed industry structure. It's like trying to win a race in a car with no engine.
Moving right along, let's get into Section 2, the Five Forces diagnostic.
So Porter's famous model argues that industry profitability depends entirely on these five specific forces. You've got competitive rivalry, which is just the sheer intensity of your current competitors. Then, the threat of new entrants. Next up, the bargaining power of suppliers, followed by the bargaining power of buyers, and finally, the threat of substitutes. Now, what's the fundamental takeaway here? Basically, the stronger these collective forces become, the lower the industry's baseline profitability. It's a direct trade-off. Your job as a strategist is to diagnose exactly which force is eroding your margins.
Let's just isolate the threat of new entrants for a second. This force is really asking, how easy is it for new capital to flow into this market? Think about it. If a scrappy startup wants to compete with Boeing or Airbus, well, they're going to need billions of dollars in capital, decades of complex engineering expertise, and massive regulatory clearance. The entry barrier there is an absolute fortress. No one's just walking in. Conversely, opening a local coffee shop, that requires pretty minimal capital and easy local distribution. So in that space, the threat of entry is sky high.
And that perfectly illustrates our next golden rule. The easier it is to enter, the harder it is to sustain profits. It makes sense, right? Smart executives know this, so they actively build economic moats, whether that's through patents, exclusive contracts, or massive economies of scale, all to protect their margins from those newcomers.
All right, let's shift gears to Section 3, the power dynamics.
You see, power in business always shifts toward whoever controls scarce resources. Just look at NVIDIA right now. AI companies are totally dependent on their chips. Real alternatives are practically non-existent, making the switching costs absolutely enormous. Because of that, NVIDIA holds massive, unchecked supplier power. But then, on the flip side, let's look at Walmart. They purchase goods in such staggering, unbelievable volumes that they essentially dictate the terms to their vendors. So in the Walmart ecosystem, buyer power is what completely dominates.
Now, I want to take a quick pause here because I really want you to think critically about this idea of switching costs. Think about it. Consumers can switch from one supermarket to another in a matter of minutes, right? No big deal. But what about a massive multinational corporation that relies on SAP software for literally all of its daily global operations? What happens to the power dynamics in these two totally different scenarios? Just take a second and really think about it.
Well, here's the answer. When switching costs are low, like simply changing where you buy your groceries, buyer power strengthens. Customers can demand lower prices and better quality because they can easily walk away. But with enterprise software like SAP, the switching costs are astronomically high. The corporation is essentially locked in, which means their buyer power just plummets. As an executive, your strategy should be to create ecosystems that drive up those switching costs. I mean, Apple's entire ecosystem is an absolute masterclass in doing exactly this.
Okay, let's move into section 4, strategic blind spots.
All right, let's test your strategic instincts a bit. Imagine Apple is aggressively negotiating chip prices with TSMC. Meanwhile, Pepsi is lowering its prices to fight off Coca-Cola. Quick question for you. Which of these scenarios is horizontal competition and which one is vertical? Go ahead, lock in your answer.
Okay, here is the breakdown. Horizontal competition happens at the exact same level of the value chain. So that is Pepsi going to war with Coca-Cola, their peers fighting for the same shelf space. Vertical competition, on the other hand, involves the struggle between different levels of the supply chain, specifically between suppliers and buyers. That's Apple aggressively negotiating with its chip manufacturer TSMC. So the easy way to remember this, horizontal means competitors, vertical means suppliers and customers.
Now, let's tackle another major blind spot that catches so many people off guard. Say a business traveler who usually flies from Doha to Dubai decides, you know what, I'm just going to conduct a Zoom meeting instead. Is Zoom a competitor to the airline, or is it a substitute? What do you think?
If you guess substitute, you hit the nail on the head. Zoom satisfies the exact same fundamental customer need, which is communication and connection, but it does so in a completely different way than an airline does. Direct competitors would be like Uber versus Lyft. Substitutes, though, are like taking the subway instead of getting an Uber. And let me tell you, ignoring substitutes is fatal. Just look at how traditional film companies totally ignored digital photography because they were way too busy just watching each other.
Let's bring this all together in Section 5, the consultant synthesis.
I want you to imagine you are advising a major streaming platform, and they're facing this exact scenario. Ready? New competitors are flooding into the market. Customers are canceling their subscriptions with a single effortless click. Free platforms like YouTube and gaming sites are eating up massive amounts of screen time. And to top it all off, content creators are suddenly demanding exorbitant licensing fees.
So synthesize this environment for me. Which force appears to be the strongest? You've got new entrants, sure. You've got practically zero switching costs, which is heavily driving up buyer power. You have YouTube acting as a massive free substitute, and creators are flexing their supplier power. So which force is hurting profitability the absolute most? Well, in this specific scenario, it's highly likely that intense buyer power, driven by those super easy cancellations, combined with the vast array of free substitutes, are the primary culprits just bleeding the platform's margins dry. Let's summarize these crucial blind spots, the ones you absolutely must avoid in your careers, your boardroom meetings, and your exams. First, never assume direct competitors are your only threat. Powerful suppliers and buyers can be just as lethal, if not more so. Second, never confuse competitors with substitutes. They are not the same thing. And most importantly, never ever assume that high customer demand automatically guarantees high profits. At the end of the day, it is the industry structure that ultimately dictates your profitability.
I want to leave you with this final, truly provocative thought. When you're out there analyzing an industry, don't just memorize the 5 forces like a textbook exercise. Really ask yourself, who truly holds the power here? Where exactly is the margin leaking? And ultimately, as a strategic leader or an investor, would I actually put my hard-earned capital into this market? True strategists evaluate structural profitability long before they ever worry about operational execution. Thank you so much for joining me in this Explainer Masterclass today, and I'll see you in the next one.